Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
It is with great pleasure that we have on now a friend of the show. When you're on the second time, you become friend of the show. And
so what does it make you?
Oh, I don't know what I am. We have the great Graham Smokey Dawson, the man whose voice entertained us mainly through footy and cricket stuff, but also Olympics and Commonwealth Games. A legend of the ABC. Good morning to you, Smokey.
Yes, good morning, Ron. I'm looking for a new PR manager.
No, more than happy, because I can now say that I've worked with you as well, which was a great pleasure.
And sadly, it would appear that we probably won't be doing the same thing this year, and we'll have to wait for 2021, I hope.
No, that's true. Well, we should tell that story because it says a lot about your character too. The RecLink organisation, which we promote regularly at this radio station, do a marvellous job with men and women who've come upon hard times and have sort of trying to get back into society. And football has been the vehicle to do that for many. And they have a big day in the peanut farm in St Kilda.
Yeah.
And
very appropriate with Rob involved.
And you were very good enough to go down and spend the day there calling the games, which is a great thrill for everyone concerned, and good on you for chucking a bit back to a community that's clearly given you a lot of pleasure over the years.
Yes. It's been something I've enjoyed doing for many years, Ronnie, and look forward to perhaps we can get together again next year because sadly, like everywhere else, the footy community's been pretty much decimated, hasn't it?
It has indeed. Now, we must tell, I must tell the true story. I was involved on Twitter, and there's a man who's on Twitter, Smokey Dawson's his name, and he sounds he sounds a lot like an ex-sporting caller who's just given it to all the locals these days. So I thought I'd get in touch with you again and found out that it's not in fact you. It's another person who's probably pinching your name a bit for a bit of notoriety. But,
yeah, well.
And you've had a bit of dealing with him in the past. But we'll leave him aside, but it's good to have you back anyway. But you listen a lot now rather than broadcasting games. Listen to the modern caller. It's a different way of presenting the game, isn't it? And how does it sit with you after having done and produced a different style those years ago?
I suppose it's the way time goes, Ron. You know, that's the way it goes. Something I don't make any personal comments about anyone who's still going. I might comment on what I think of people who've retired or moved to meet their maker. But that's just the way society is. But something that we talked about, it's nearly 50 years ago that I joined the ABC. I must have been a child prodigy, mustn't I? That, we talked about, even back in those days, because for most of the time I was at the ABC, we had the television rights as well as the radio broadcasting as well. And we'd talk a lot about having a slightly different style of commentary. You don't really need to do a radio commentary on a television telecast, but which I think seems to probably have got even worse in the modern era. Is it really necessary? I don't think so. But no, it is interesting, but it's a bit like the cricket, because when I started doing the cricket broadcasting in the early 70s, you only called on your expert at the end of the over, whereas these days the expert seems to make a comment after nearly every ball. That is on the radio coverage as well as the television. So, yeah, times change, and sometimes they take a little more getting used to than others.
Graham, it's Neil, and I have you and I have got something in common, and that is we've both carried Rob Cameron through football broadcasts.
Absolutely.
I've probably done it more times than you have, and I appreciate the hard work you've gone through. But I reckon one of the things, and I'd be interested in your observation, again, we're not naming names, but I think there seems to be too many people involved in any given broadcast? There seems to be sort of 7 or 8 people involved, whereas back in the good old days, you'd have 2 callers and a special comments person. Am I being unfair?
No, it's a very, very good thing. Later in my career, I'm still doing the odd broadcast now on the AFL Indigenous broadcast, which I've enjoyed getting to know some of the Indigenous boys who've played the game fairly well, and getting to know them well. It's been a real thrill. But you're absolutely right, because I can remember, working with Peter or Clark and Doug Bigelow for many, many years, and Clelo used to sneak in, and we'd have him in there, mainly commentating on how he thought the umpies were performing.
Yeah, he was always good on that.
and he'd always say they were going great. So we never asked him too often. So Clelo, he'll be listening to me up there. And yeah, and I just can't believe it. And then later on, the boundary rider got introduced on the radio. Oh, yeah, Billy Bloggs has come off and so-and-so's got a bit of an injury or whatever. Oh, I can see that from upstairs.
That's right. Yeah, well, of course, there was the great...
It is an interesting one, but, I mean, in television is even worse.
Well, I think that they're obviously paying big money to get the ex-players on there, and that's the other thing too, the difference between an ex-player and a broadcaster. We could have that conversation for half an hour, I reckon, as well. But
yep.
If you're paying good money to have a Luke Hodge or a Cameron Ling or a whoever it is, Alistair Lynch down on the boundary line, you need to make sure that you're using them, I guess, which I guess is why we're hearing from them so often.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And the guy who's directing the telecast and the executive producer would be well aware of that. They'd be making sure we've got to get the Lynchy 2 or 3 times a quarter at least, so that we can justify paying him what we're paying him, sort of thing. So, yeah, absolutely.
We're talking to ABC legend Graham Smokey Dawson. Smokey, one of the great skills that we listening, and you touched on before about the difference between broadcasting for radio and television, and then the difference between football and cricket, and the difference between that and the pole vault at the Commonwealth Games or whatever. Did you think you're just as a natural talker you're able to quickly transfer from theme to theme, or was it something you really had to work hard on and concentrate on? Righto, my role today is to do this, as opposed to yesterday when I had to do that.
No, I think I was probably very lucky, because basically I used to walk around where I grew up, tossing a ball around, doing phantom broadcasts of cricket and footy. That's all that there was about in those days, from about the age of 3 or 4. So all I ever wanted to be was a sports commentator, and to get that opportunity, you thank your lucky stars that someone there is smiling on you. But no, I seem to be able to just slot in. I mean, interesting. I mean, back in the ABC days, we covered every major golf event in Australia on television. So I grew up, both my parents were very keen golfers, and I loved the game, and I anchored the commentary and had the privilege of working with people like Peter Thompson for many years, and that was another thing. And then I'd go off to the Commonwealth Games or the Olympics and get thrown various sports that I had to do a little bit of, goodness me, what's going on here? But I remember it was late at night at the Edinburgh Commonwealth Games in 1986, and we were still broadcasting. It was just before, like it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was going off at about then, and there was nothing on apart from the gold medal match in men's badminton, men's doubles. And I said to Dick Mason, I'll broadcast that for 10 minutes to take us up to time, so that at least we've got something to talk about. And he said, will you? And I said, yeah, okay. And I reckon I got about one hit in about 4 or 5 because of the shuttle was just going over the net. And I thought, no, don't even try and keep up with that. And Dick said, and I said, oh yeah, there's a gold medal who was saying we've just beaten the Poms, you beauty. Time to go. And Dick said, thanks, mate, that wasn't bad at all.
Because I guess the other thing is too, I always remember with great amusement the great Don Wagstaff. Do you remember Don?
Oh, yeah. He was a diver.
He was a diver. He was a school teacher who dived, right? Yeah. And so every 4 years he'd be rolled out for the Olympic diving, and he would be giving a scientific analysis of every possible move. And the poor sod that was commentating and anchoring it has got no idea. He would just go, so Don, walk us through that one. Without Don, it would have been very boring.
All you have to do in that situation is say, oh, yeah, stepping up onto the platform, here's Graham Smokey Dawson, and off he goes, and righto, Don. Just shut up and just go right point to Don, and Don says, well, Smokey's moved there, he twisted his ear. Perfect. He should get a good score. 9.35, puts him in the gold medal position, as you would expect.
Now, Smokey, you were probably, from my memory, the first of the normally straight, as Rex Hunt referred to them, the Tobin brothers commentary team. You provided a bit of humour, and I think from you others used that skill and used it very well, as opposed to the modern ones who think that their job is to provide a comedy act and the football is almost a secondary consideration. But was that just your natural cheeky sense of humour that added that in, because you were really the first to do it, and were you encouraged to do it by the ABC?
No. Basically, you were given free rein, and I'm sure if it was thought that the call was not going as they would have wished, I might have been tapped on the shoulder and said, but no, that never happened, and it was just something that obviously evolved over time as you get a bit more experience and you...
and confidence, I suppose, is another important thing.
And develop a bit of a style, and you just need to, I suppose, be yourself. That's what I have said to many young people who are aspiring commentators. You know, there are certain things you've got to do. You've got to obviously know your players, particularly in a radio broadcast, to be able to identify who they are, and then you've got to tell them where the ball is. And the other thing that you can't do often enough, and it does frustrate me when it doesn't happen, is you can't give the score often enough in a radio commentary, because you're assuming that people aren't seeing it. What's the score? You know?
And what's even more frustrating in the modern game, you're waiting for it, and finally they say it's 18-36, and you've still got no idea what the score is.
Oh, yeah, but at least that's a start. Or you say, the Hawks are leading the Cats by 142 points. Sorry, Cove, I had to get that or whatever, and then they'll come back and you can say, Hawthorn 26 goals, 20 and 4 goals too, or whatever it might be. And so, but you let people know what is happening as well as the score, and then I've said to them, you then develop your own style. Be yourself. Don't copy anyone. If there's a few things that they might say, well, you can quietly slip them into your commentary, but be yourself. But there are certain fundamentals that need to be followed.
You did mention the name Ian Cover, who will be listening. So when the Coodabbeens arrived on the scene, you must have thought this is a breath of fresh air, being the cheeky little devil that you were yourself.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was great because in our ABC days, and the Coodabbeens were starting on community radio, and I mean, I heard them say early in the year that, you know, this was year number 40 or something, so it would have been early to mid-80s. I can remember basically every year for 3 or 4 years, indeed, and Cove can let you know exactly what, because I'm sure they would, but we used to go to the Fitzroy Town Hall as a big fundraiser for them, and for the radio station that they were working on, and it was packed out. People would think they were having liquid refreshments and food, and they'd take the ABC. It was basically Peter and Cleo and Doug and I'd go along and sit up on stage with the Coodabeen boys Cove was leading the way with Richo and whatever, and they were great occasions. So, and I can remember several times having members of the Could-have-beens sneaking into the ABC commentary box at various rounds, depending on who we were broadcasting. And if Richmond were playing, Richo was there. If the Cats were playing, Cove would probably put his nose in and sit down and have a look. And I remember Simon coming down to Moorabbin many times because he was a passionate St Kilda man, and obviously still is. So, no, great days, and it's wonderful to tune in and when I finish with you boys, that's where I'll be putting the radio.
No, that's fair enough too. Now, we just mentioned another fellow who, Carey Grammar Connection, I spoke to during the week, and I mentioned you were going to be on, and he said to say g'day, was former Fitzroy Rover Johnny Newnham. We had him on a few weeks ago, and he remembers you very fondly and asked to pass on his best.
Well, there you go. No, he was a little older than me. He was one of my boyhood heroes because he was obviously a superstar footballer at school, and his boys went through the school, so no, well done to John, and a wonderful career at Fitzroy, and a state player, and a really great Carey man, and probably a few have come through. I still do a bit of umpiring of a Saturday morning when they play, and over recent years there was a period I umpired the young boys, year 7s and 8s and things. There was a nice run where we had Andrew Gaff come through. Then the next year was Tom Mitchell, and then the next year was Jack McRae at the Bulldogs and Jack Finey. So a bit of talent. And then 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, I suppose it is now, there's a young fella called Matt Rowell and his mate Noah Anderson. And
have you seen them up close and personal then?
Well, I after during the second game, Rowley's hit this kid on the chest off his left 40 metres lace out. And I've just sidled up to him and I said, Rowley, what's your natural side? And he said, right. And I said, yeah, I thought so. And I walked off, and standing on the sideline, the man who's now the deputy principal was a senior member of staff. And I said, gee, that kid out there can play a bit. He said, yep. And he'd come over from Caulfield Grammar, and he said, I coached Juddy at about the same age, and I have not seen anyone anywhere near Juddy at the same age until I've seen this boy. So that was a pretty big rap, yeah. And what we've seen so far, and the tragedy of that injury, but the first he's ever had in his footy career, he's one to keep an eye on, because I think he's going to be a star of the comp for many years.
I'm just devastated that you didn't mention Christian Jacks. I coached him as a junior.
Well, there you go. Well, he was in the same year as Jack Finey and Jack McRae.
He was.
And got drafted. We had 5 Carey boys got drafted that year in the draft.
And in that year also, there was a young kid called Nick Ansell who went on to play for Melbourne Victory.
Yeah.
And he was another one of my kids in my team.
Oh, okay.
And another kid called Dan McGrath, who didn't go to Carey. He went to, I think, the local high school. Might have been Whitefriars, actually, up in Donvale. I coached him as well. He's now a rookie pitcher in the Boston Red Sox League over in the US.
Geez, it's amazing how these young fellas can get on and fulfil their dreams, which is fantastic. Work hard, and kids, you can do it.
In that team also is a kid called Sam Butler. He's my son, but not the one that played for West Coast, sadly. But no, I've got to ask you this before we wind up, because you've got things to do. If you were given the opportunity, and you can mix sports here if you want to, you've been invited to do your ultimate call. What sport, what arena?
Yeah, good work, Neil. That was going to be my final as well.
That's a question I had. Everyone asks, what was your favourite sport? Well, I'll say 2 things, 3 things, 4 things.
We'll still be here at midday.
Yeah, that's right. No, look, if it's the last Saturday in September, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else than the MCG. And if it's Boxing Day, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else than the MCG. No, I honestly couldn't. I just loved doing it, and I had no favourites. I must admit to I was undoubtedly a better cricketer than I was footballer. But that didn't ever influence what I thought about broadcasting. And I say to people now, the greatest game of all is golf, because you and I could go out and play a game of a match against Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus at his peak, and we could beat them because of the fact that there are things called handicaps. And so you put them all up and then say, gee, had some interesting times at the Olympic Games with sports and the Commonwealth Games with sports there are a couple of things that still get played occasionally from way back, and you think, I enjoyed that, and it was rather good. But no, I'm sorry, boys, I wouldn't, as I said, last Saturday in September, there's only one place in the world you'd want to be, and that's the MCG, and on Boxing Day it's the same. There's only one place you want to be, and that's boxing.
Is the Olympic 100 metres the only other one that matches those two?
Sorry?
With calling the Olympic 100 metre men's final the only other event that would match those two?
That was something that I never really did at that level, was called track and field. I know when Norman May retired, I was later told I was designated to take over as a swimming commentator. But when the Australian Championships, and they were the Commonwealth Games selection trials, were held in March 1986 for the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh, I was in New Zealand covering the Australian cricket tour. So Jerry Collins got the gig and did a good job, so he got the gig doing the swimming. So that's why I used to, do the weightlifting, the volleyball, the weights or whatever at the Olympic Games. Didn't mind.
Well, you certainly need a sense of humour to do those, not obscure sports.
Exactly, and I mean, I think I sat in a studio, calling it off the television, making out I was somewhere. I wasn't. When Jane Saville got disqualified, she called her home for about an hour, and she was just about to go into the stadium and, handing over to whoever was up in the commentary box to bring her around, and she's got disqualified. Well, I know my dear friends at the National Broadcaster replayed that moment for most of every day for the next year. So we were in Manchester at the 2002 Commonwealth Games, and I had a bit of help with Mark. He said, Walshy will come in with you. So Peter Walsh and I basically there was nothing else on again, so we did the 2 hours of the race, and I said to Walshy at one stage, we must have had a break for a minute or two, and I said, in the home straight, I'm bringing her home to make up for Sydney 2000. And he said, don't worry, Smoke, you've got it. And so some nice things that have happened, and great memories.
You must have been tired chasing her around that track, though. That's the thing to do your commentary.
She could walk faster than I could run, I can promise you that.
Graham, it's been absolutely sensational to have you here on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show. Thanks for taking some time out of your Saturday morning for us.
Oh, a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you at the Rec League Grand Finals in 2021, Ron.
I will be back.
Have another chat again in the near future. Love it.
Good on you, mate.
Thanks, mate. All the best.
All the best, and all the best to your millions of listeners. And don't drive off the road, Cove.
Both of them. Yep. Thanks,
See you
mate.
later.
See ya.